come on, guys. This is not cool. Come on, guys. Really? No one? You're just going to leave me out there just all by myself, just standing there alone. You're just going to leave me feeling like, oh, wow, that did not go well. No one, not one of you thought it was good. No one thought it was funny. No one thought it was convicting. No one thought it was refreshingly honest. No one thought it was brutally honest. Not one person, just nothing, just silence. No one. Really? Come on. This is not cool. This is not cool. No one seemed to have appreciated my last comment I made in my last live broadcast, where I ended that broadcast saying, all right, guys, I'm going to go be fake because that's what good Christians do. No one seemed to find that humorous. They didn't find that, come on, it was honest. It was brutally honest. Right? Remember, I was trying to make a point about the fruits of the Spirit and how even if we, seem to put forth externally some kind of evidence of this fruit, it doesn't really mean anything because internally it may be the complete opposite. And I used a situation where during the broadcast, someone kept trying to call me. It was my daughter, and now I was going to call her back, but I was going to put forth the idea. Put forth the image that I was perfectly okay with all of the calls during my live broadcast, and it's perfectly okay that it messed it up, no big deal, and that would be completely fake because inside I was frustrated and I was irritated. I thought I was making a very profound point, but nothing. No one seemed to appreciate that statement. I'm so disappointed. I almost retired yesterday. Okay, no, I didn't almost retire. See, now I'm being fake again. Now I'm being fake in an over-dramatic way, but come on. I thought it was good. But all right, we'll set all of that aside. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's focus for Friday, May the 10th, 2024. And today's focus is thorns. Know when to hold them, know when to fall. Okay, all right, I'm trying to borrow from Kenny Rogers. Okay. But we are going to be talking about thorns this morning. Now, I may be making a big mistake here. I may be making a huge mistake because I originally, what I was going to do, the audio I'm going to be using, I was going to call this episode Thorns and Thunder. Thorns and Thunder, because really this episode is about, the seven thunders. The seven thunders as mentioned in the book of Revelation. And I thought, okay, I don't know where they're going to go with this, but maybe I'll play this. But before they get to the seven thunders, they talk about thorns and they kind of do something with thorns mentioned in the Bible. And I'm like, I could call it Thorns and Thunder, or I could just take the first part of this and kind of just throw it out there for your today's focus is like, okay, what they do with thorns in this message that we're going to be listening to, is that a correct application? Is that a correct hermeneutical approach to it? Is this death by cross-referencing? How do we understand this? So I have made the editorial decision that we're just going to look at the thorns part, and then maybe later we'll come back and listen to the thunder part. This is just, again, for our Sermons 2.0 app challenge. I'm just grabbing, random sermons and listening like I've told everyone to do. I know this week is all about Galatians chapter 5, 22 and following. But, sometimes I have to take a break. And so I took a break and I thought, just grab a different sermon. And this one is entitled, in fact, I can pull it up here on the app. Are the seven thunders written in the scriptures? Are the seven thunders written in the scriptures? Now, the title obviously immediately intrigued me. And then when I started listening, before they get to the thunders, they mention thorns and they kind of do something with the thorns that I'm not telling you whether I agree or disagree. I'm not telling you whether I think it's right or wrong. For today's focus, I'm going to present it to you and for you to focus on for the rest of the day. Is that the correct way to do cross-referencing? If you look in one verse and let's say it mentions thorns, then can you run to all the other verses in the Bible that mention thorns and somehow connect them? Just because the same word is used, is there a connection? can you say, well, this verse mentions this, well, that verse does, and that verse does, so somehow these are all connected? Now, a lot of people love to do that, right? They'll see a word mentioned in a verse, they'll just grab a concordance, and like, hey, look, and like, whoa, wait a minute. Are you sure those are connected? Like, what are you basing this on? What is your reasoning for connecting this? Well, like, why are you doing that? Now, I think sometimes the text allows it. The text may even demand it, but you've got to be able to offer some kind of a textual explanation for example, I am the true vine. In John 15, we spent a lot of time working on that. Well, what did I do? Well, I am the true vine. I took the word vine and I went back to the Old Testament where Israel's referred to as a vine. You may go, well, what gave you the right to do that? Well, first, I am. The I am statements. What do all the I am statements do in John? Well, Jesus compares and contrasts himself with things that are less, things that are incomplete. Well, I am the true vine. Jesus has to be comparing himself as the true vine with the lesser, the incomplete vine. Well, what would that be? Well, he's speaking to people who know the Old Testament. I think it's Israel in the context. And then if you consider the rest of the things said about branches being removed, you can go to Romans chapter 11. Once again, that's a reference to Israel. So I think I was able to textually make an argument, not just because the same words were used, but because of context, because of what Jesus was doing, because of other cross-referencing. I think I made a somewhat of a valid case, a valid point. I think so. So in this particular case, they want to get to the seven thunders, but I think what they're trying to establish is, hey, in the Bible, when you see something mentioned, if you go look in the rest of the Bible, sometimes you can expand on its meaning. You can expand, but when can we expand on the meaning and when can we not? See, these are hermeneutical questions. Sometimes people hear these hermeneutical questions and hermeneutical discussions and they go, oh, well, I don't care about all of that, whatever. But you have to care, because this is why there's so much disagreement with the Bible, because we don't necessarily agree on what you can do to a text, when you can do it, how far you can take a text, what limits should be placed upon the text. There's no agreement on it. And since in many cases there is no, put it this way, there is no agreement on hermeneutical rules. There isn't. Some people will go to the Old Testament when it's mentioning what we clearly seems to be the nation of Israel. They'll say that's the church. And you're like, wait a minute, when did that become the church? How did that become the church? And so there's all of this, just when we take it literal, when someone may take it allegorical, if it is allegorical, how far can we go? When it comes to the parables, what can or what can we not do with them? There's so many hermeneutical questions where there is literally no agreement. So what I want to do briefly for today's focus, all I want to do is just kind of present this to you. We're going to listen to a part of this sermon. Again, are the seven thunders written in scriptures? You should go look it up and download it for yourself. We probably will return to this sermon because I do want to know where he gets to with the seven thunders. But as I was listening, before he got to the seven thunders, he mentioned thorns. And then I was like, oh, wait, well, I've got to do something with that. Now, again, originally I was going to turn this into like an hour and a half long episode, not do it as a today's focus and just say, hey, thorns and thunder, let's go. But no. Thorns, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Are these thorns, should they be applied to us? Should they not be applied to us? What should we do with them? Well, we're about to find out as we listen to the beginning of this sermon and see what we can do. All right. So your today's focus is simply to focus on these thorns and just, hey, is this good cross-referencing, bad cross-referencing, good application, bad application? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Well, you put your thinking caps on and let's listen right now.
When I was in Bible college and taking Greek class, we had it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 o'clock in the morning, so we had time, and the teacher, at the end of every class, would assign us the next lesson in our Greek book, and it usually involved some new words, some new verb endings, and things like that, and then it included just a little portion of 2 or 3 Greek sentences that we had to translate and translate properly. And the teacher's name was Randy Wilson. He was a younger guy, so he was pretty good to get along with, and we named our game Randy Roulette. And we would all show up for class. Maybe 1 or 2 guys did their homework. But we'd show up for class, and we'd all be opening our books up for the first time in days. And we're trying desperately to translate that first verse. And he would pick on somebody in the class.
It is funny to me that I think maybe you have the impression that if you're in a Bible college or a seminary, that everyone's like, they're hungry, they're thirsty, they're desiring for knowledge, and they as soon as class is over, they want to go home and do their homework because you're studying the Word of God, you're learning Greek, you're learning Hebrew, you're learning church history, you're learning systematic theology, biblical theology, practical theology, and that there's all this desire to work hard and to do this and to study, and it's a lot like just normal school. It's more. I'm not going to say it's. Put it this way, there's plenty of it. Cheating occurs. I know we would never think that would happen, but cheating occurs. In fact, I knew someone who went off to, I think it was Dallas Theological Seminary, and they ended up being kicked out of school for cheating. So I think it was Dallas Theological Seminary. It was a school in Dallas. I'm almost positive it was Dallas Theological Seminary. And so these things happen. I know it's not what people want to envision, but you should just realize everyone goes to Bible college. Everyone goes to seminary. They're sinners, just like the kids across town at the secular university. We're all sinners. It continues to show up. I know that I have to repeat that over and over and over because so much of Christianity is this idea that when you become a Christian, all of your sin basically goes away and we can be perfect, but it's just not true. All the same kinds of things happen on Bible college. It's just the way it works. You have sinners there. Now, I know the go-to excuse, well, they're just not Christians. We throw anyone who does anything contrary to Christianity out of Christianity, which then if you continue to do that, you'll be throwing yourself out of Christianity. But I digress. So I do find that interesting that, hey, nobody did their homework, and you're hoping someone did. And so they're going to talk about, hey, how they tried to get around no one doing their homework by hoping that when you got into class, that he's going to call other people. And so you can be sitting there trying to do what you need to do so that if he calls on you, you'll be ready to go. So just kind of demonstrates this. Now, how this illustration is being used, what's his point here? Well, we'll see.
And he would say, okay, JR, give us your interpretation of the first sentence there. If it wasn't us, we'd hurriedly go to the next sentence. Start trying to translate it. And if you picked somebody else, if you were lucky, you didn't get picked at all.
I know he just misspoke there, but for everyone else, in Greek class, you're not supposed to be giving your interpretation. You're supposed to be giving your translation, okay? You're not supposed to be giving your interpretation. You're supposed to be translating the Greek text into English. You're not supposed to be interpreting it, okay? You're supposed to be translating it, okay? But all right.
If you were kind of lucky, you got picked on the third one because you had more time to translate it. And it was just Randy Roulette. If he picked on you and you weren't ready, well, that was a deduction in your grade, all right? So you guys have been playing hog roulette, hoping I don't pick on you. Who studied the 7 thunders? I wonder. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to ask you if you have any idea. Chapter 10, verse 1, I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot on the earth, and cried with a loud voice, as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices.
That's Revelation chapter 10. Revelation chapter 10, verse 3. And he cried with a loud voice, and as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. All right, now, This is, I mean, he already got my attention right here. This is interesting. This is great. Now, I know we may want to get to the seven thunders, but what he's going to do before he gets to the seven thunders, he's going to then go to this concept of thorns. I want to focus for today's focus on the thorn part, just because then we can challenge ourselves hermeneutically. If what he suggests, do we agree, disagree? And then maybe at a different, maybe I don't know about tomorrow. I don't know when. Maybe Monday, whoever. Maybe later today. At some point, we'll come back and we'll work on the seven thunders part. If we use this just for today's focus series, then maybe I'll try to throw this in tomorrow for today's focus. But I know we've been working on Galatians 5, but we're taking a little break. And I want you to also kind of work on this. Those seven thunders. What can we know about those seven thunders? Are those seven thunders explained in the text? Is it explained in Revelation? Is it explained somewhere else? What do thorns have to do with this? Let's see how he begins to kind of take this apart and let's see what we can do with it.
And when the seven thunders had uttered their voices, I was about to write. And I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, seal up those things which the seven thunders uttered, and write them not. Now, I think a clue to this is what John said in the middle of verse 4. I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, seal up those things which the seven thunders uttered, and write them not. Now, you can say, well, that's kind of splitting hairs. Well, the whole Bible has hairs to split in it. And I have learned that the very language of practically every verse in the Bible is deliberate. Well, all of the verses are deliberate. The way that they're said, things that God... let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. When Paul mentioned that in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, when Paul mentioned that he had a thorn in his flesh, a messenger of Satan to buffet him, you notice that he did not identify what that thorn was. He didn't say such and such or this and that is my thorn. All he said was that there was a devil, a messenger, an angel of Satan that came to him and buffeted him, beat him up, okay, tore him up, kept him humble, kept him pure. But he never did say what it was.
Now, we could stop right there, okay? Now, you see, he was going to the seven thunders, and he's going to obviously make some kind of argument that the seven thunders can be understood. We can know what they said. They're found somewhere in Scripture. At least that seems to be the argument he's going to make. Now, once he started getting to the thorn part, that's when I was like, oh, okay, let me stay with this, because he's kind of using the thorn part really to set up the hermeneutical principle or the hermeneutical approach that he's going to take to the seven thunders. So before we get to the seven thunders, I just want us to focus on the thorn part. So let me just read this. So, because there's a couple of things already said, or at least one major thing that he said right there that jumped out at me. So I'm going to go to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Right? And I'm going to read this part right here, verse 7. And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. Now, the text is explicit. This was given to Paul so that he would not be exalted above measure because of the great revelations that he was given, because of the things he had seen, the truth that he was entrusted with. There was a chance maybe he could become arrogant. So this messenger of Satan, as it is described, was a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan. This thorn of the flesh, a messenger of Satan to buffet him, was to keep him humble. Now, he said was to keep him pure. Now, the question immediately is, wait a minute, can we take this section about Paul, which is clearly a historical narrative describing exactly what happened? Is it descriptive, or do we make it somehow prescriptive to us? That in your life or my life, we get a messenger from Satan. We get a thorn in the flesh that is there to humble us or to purify us. Now, if it's to purify us, then you think because every Christian needs to be purified because we still have a sinful nature, right? So then does every Christian just need, like, the more thorns, the more pure we become? The more thorns, the more humble we become? Because I've met lots of Christians who seem to lack humility. They seem to have an abundance of pride. Same is true of me. So then does every negative thing that shows up at Satan? Now, this is where trying to apply this can become tricky, right? Oh, something bad happened to you. Well, that was just a thorn in the flesh. Be grateful. Be grateful that's happening to you because it's to keep you humble and it's to purify you. Now, you got to be careful when you say that, right? Because that would be very insensitive and very cruel. But the question just remains, this challenges, how do you understand things that happen in your life? Do you see it as, hey, this is a thorn? Now, can you say for sure it's a thorn? Is every negative thing in your life a thorn? Is Job ever given that information? Was all the horrible things that happened to Job was just a messenger of Satan, a thorn in the flesh to humble him? I don't think there's any way to read the book of Job and come to that conclusion. The text seems to say he was perfect. He was upright. So I think it's impossible to draw that conclusion. And why wouldn't God just tell him, hey, but there's nothing in the text where God says, hey, I'm doing this because Job needs to be humbled and he needs to be purified. No, God seems to do this to prove a point, right? God is the one who set everything up for Job. So is there any way to definitively say? Is a thorn in the flesh, do we apply a thorn in the flesh only to physical element like sickness, disease, or injury? Or can you go beyond that? Like, what are the limits to understanding a thorn in the flesh? Is it bad things that happen to you, like bad circumstances, maybe lose your job, something happen? Or is it only things that happen really inside of you, like a disease or an injury, something that's going on in your body? Like what are the limits? What are the limits? Now, because if there are no limits, in fact, if you listen to countless sermons on this subject, people will do all kinds of things with this thorn of the flesh. Is this text saying, is this something? Now, the text specifically says this was given to Paul. This is for Paul. Is this for us? How much freedom do you have here to take this? And lest I, please note how the pronouns work, unless I, that's the author here, we believe to be Paul, I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations that were given to me. Well, have we been given abundance of revelations? Now, we would say we have the word of God. Well, then this would mean everyone who has a Bible has to get a thorn in the flesh. There was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, and my strength is made perfect in weakness. Now, should we be praying for it to be removed? If it's being done for our spiritual good? And then how do we understand my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness? What weakness is that referencing to? Just our fleshly weakness, like our strength, our endurance, or does it speak of spiritual weakness, like our propensity to sin? Is our propensity to sin, our weakness, is that actually a good thing? Like there's a lot here, because I think pastors and devotional writers and Christian speakers, there have been countless things that they have done with this. Where do you draw the line going, that application has gone just too far? Where is the limit? There's got to be some limit, right? Let's see what he does, because he's going to expand the meaning of the thorns. Now, I don't know if he's really going to articulate exactly how we are to interpret the thorns here, because he's using this simply to try to say we can expand the meaning by looking at Scripture. So then he's going to return back to Revelation, take the seven thunders, and then try to expand it or try to understand what they were actually saying. So this is kind of setting up his whole hermeneutical argument. Let's see what he does here.
Speculate that it may have had something to do with his eyesight, because he couldn't see there toward the end, and he was having people write out what he dictated to them. And then in the book of Galatians, he takes the pen and he says, see with what large letter I write on you with my own hand. That was Paul's way of letting them know it really did come from Paul. And the fact that he couldn't see, because he mentions in another place, he said, if you could have, you would have given your own eyes to me. So we know that it was a deal with his eyes.
And I always find that fascinating when charismatics say healing is guaranteed. Well, if Paul couldn't see and had eye problems, why wasn't Paul just healed? He didn't have enough faith? I mean, you're going to have a hard time. Like, clearly that would demonstrate healing is not guaranteed. Okay, but all right. So Paul had problems. Well, so if Paul's thorn in the flesh was his eyes, then are eye problems the thorn in the flesh? Again, is it just a physical condition? Is that what the thorn is, or can you expand it beyond that?
Paul didn't mention that the thorn that he had was related to his eyes. So what does that mean? It means that if you want to find out if you have a thorn in your flesh, which you probably do, and you want to find out what it is, go to the Scripture. The Scriptures actually broaden the meaning of what thorns represent in the Bible.
Okay, so now here's his kind of hermeneutical approach. Hey, you read 2 Corinthians 12, Paul doesn't necessarily tell you what the thorn is. So now you're like, do I have a thorn? Now he's immediately assuming, the assumption is, the presupposition here is that, hey, this does apply to us. There's not even a question that possibly this is just a descriptive thing of what happened to Paul. It's immediately assumed it applies to us. That's the first question. Okay, where is the limit here? But okay, this applies to us. All right. So now if this applies to us, then he's like, for you to be able to figure out if you have a thorn in the flesh, you have to go to the Scriptures to figure it out. So he's now going to go find other Scriptures that mention the word thorns. And somehow this is now the hermeneutical key, or the hermeneutical principle is, when we go look up these other verses that mention thorns, that's going to be able to help you determine whether you have a thorn or not a thorn. Which I believe immediately he's going to expand the meaning of thorns beyond than just something inside our body. This can apply to anything negative. So let's see how he offers some examples here.
In the parable of the seed and the sower, where the seed is sown, but the thorns and the thistles choke it out, Jesus says that it's the deceitfulness of riches, the lust of other things. I can't remember the third thing, but there was three things there that Jesus sort of gave us a clue on about.
Now, wait a minute. So now he just expanded the meaning of thorns here, right? Hey, I'm going to look this up. Okay, hang on. Let me look at, I think it's Matthew 13. I think it's also mentioned in Mark. Okay, but how about Matthew 13? Let's go to Matthew 13. Matthew 13, where does it show up in Matthew 13? Okay, Matthew 13, here we go. Okay, that's not the one I want. Let's see here. He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field. Okay. I don't think that's the one. I don't think that's the one he's referencing. Okay, hang on. I'm going to do this. Everything keeps going to Matthew 13. Am I missing it? Matthew 13. Hang on here. Let me just look here. I wish you would have given us the reference. Okay. Okay, yeah, here we go. Maybe he's going to explain it later on here. Yeah, see, I don't think that's the one he's referencing. But he just now made the thorns. He made the thorns now like all these negative things. Like, in fact, I'm going to back that up just a little.
Eyes. But Paul didn't mention that the thorn that he had was related to his eyes. So what does that mean? It means that if you want to find out if you have a thorn in your flesh, which you probably do, and you want to find out what it is, go to the Scripture. The Scriptures actually broaden the meaning of what thorns represent in the Bible. In the parable of the seed and the sower, where the seed is sown, but the thorns and the thistles choke it out, Jesus says that it's the deceitfulness of riches, the lust of other things. I can't remember the third thing, but there was three things there that Jesus sort of gave us a clue on about what the thorns represent. And you can go back into, let's see here, in Judges chapters 1 and 2.
Okay, I think I'm going to go to Mark. I think that's where it's easier to see what they're saying. Okay, so, all right, here we go. So Mark chapter 4. I'm going to go to Mark chapter 4. Matthew 13, it may be there, but I think Mark 4, maybe it's a little easier to see. Mark 4, verse 14. So now he's going to go to Judges. But he just now immediately threw out, hey, if you want to know what your thorn is, look at these other passages. And what he's simply doing is look at these other passages simply because the word thorn is mentioned. And now thorns here can be, hey, so if you see a passage that mentions thorns, now, those thorns can be the thorns that can be given to someone because of 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Now, I don't know. We can get into a whole discussion here on whether we think this is good cross-referencing and good application. But he goes to Mark chapter 4, verse 14. The sower soweth the word, and these are they by the wayside where the word has sown. But when they have heard, Satan cometh immediately and taketh away the word that was sown in their hearts. And these are like the wise which are sown on stony ground, who when they have heard the word immediately receive it with gladness, have no root in themselves, and so endure for a time. Afterward, when affliction or persecution ariseth for the word's sake, immediately they are offended. And these are they which are sown among thorns, such as hear the word. And the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things entering in, choketh the word. So now he's saying, hey, do you have a thorn? So now a thorn that can be given to you would be the cares of the world, deceitfulness of riches, and lust of other things. So you are given a thorn. You are given a thorn so that you will be purified and so that you will not be exalted. And so what God gives you is the thorns of... And see, this is where it would become, I don't even know how you would make this application work all the way. So then what would be given to you are the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things. Do I need to be given a thorn of lust to have a lust for other things? Do I need to be given a thorn of the deceitfulness of riches? Do I need to be given a thorn for the cares of the world? Aren't those things kind of just a part of our sinful nature, a part of who we are? Because the thorns is supposed to keep you from being exalted. It's supposed to purify you. I mean, those are the words he used. So are you telling me that these are the thorns that can be given to you? Hey, if someone comes to you, man, I keep being so worried about all the cares of this world. I'm full of worry and anxiety about the care. Well, guess what? You've been given a thorn. This is a good thing. So it's supposed to purify you. Well, how is this supposed to purify me? Because this seems to say that this will choke out the word in my life. Well, no, it's actually a good thing. No, this is spoken here in Mark as a negative thing. This actually chokes out the word of God from growing. But now this is supposed to be a good. 2 Corinthians seems to imply that it's a good thing. So is that a good cross-reference? Someone comes to you and says, hey, the riches, money, wealth, I'm being deceived by riches and money and wealth. Well, it's a thorn in the flesh. This is a good thing. So you're saying then God would want sin in our life because sin in our life humbles us? Well, no. God doesn't want sin in your life. Well, then why would he give me a thorn of these things? If he just applied these thorns to the thorn in 2 Corinthians, is that a good cross-reference? Is that a good application? Again, thorns, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Is this where you just fold and go, no. This is not the hand that I want. This is not for me. I don't know that cross-reference. Okay, so there's Mark 4. Right now, I think now did he say Judges? I'm going to back this up just a little bit again. So we can come right back into this.
It says that it's the deceitfulness of riches, the lust of other things. I can't remember the third thing, but there was three things there that Jesus sort of gave us a clue on about what the thorns represent. And you can go back into, let's see here, in Judges chapters 1 and 2, and part of 3, you can see that the remnants of the Canaanites and the Hittites that Joshua and his men left in the land when they were told clearly to wipe them all out. There's our egg people right there, everybody. The eggheads are here finally. And there they go, leaving the church. No, just the Canaanites and the Hittites that were left in the land, God said, they're going to be thorns in your sides.
Now, how do you apply that to 2 Corinthians? The Canaanites, the Hittites, these people that they were supposed to drive out, they're going to be thorns in your side. So who are you supposed to be driving out? So anyone in your life that's causing problems in your life, those are the Canaanites and the Hittites. Those are thorns. So hang on. Let's go back to 2 Corinthians. Let me go back to 2 Corinthians. All right. This is, I don't know about this cross-reference. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to verse 7, 2 Corinthians 12:7. And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. It was given to him. Who gave it to him? Is it God? If God is the one who gives the thorn, then you're going to tell me thorn is the lust of things and the deceitfulness of riches and the cares of this world. God literally gives you those things for your spiritual good. God's going to literally give you the Canaanites and the Hittites. No, in Judges, the Canaanites and the Hittites, they become a thorn because they didn't do what God told them to do. God wasn't the one who gave them to them. God gave them the solution to get rid of them. So how does this apply to 2 Corinthians? Oh, well, it uses the word thorns. Just because the same word is used does not mean hermeneutically that you draw the correlation. It sounds good. It may preach good. It may get everyone go, oh, I never thought about connecting them. Maybe you never thought about connecting them because I don't know if we should.
Because you left them there and you're always going to be vexed by them. They're going to cause trouble in your land. And I will say that any amount of compromise in our life where God clearly tells us to do something and we absolutely refuse to do it, and I don't mean slip up every now and then, I mean refuse to do it. When we compromise, God has a way of turning those things that we compromise on into vexations and thorns. Thus with the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Hivites and the Perizzites.
So is that how we're to understand Paul's thorn? Hey, Paul compromised. Paul refused to do what God told him to do, so he was given a thorn. So now are we going to say that Paul's thorn was given to him because he was compromising or he was sinning? So God gave him vexation? So now would it be that any thorn in your life, the reason you have it is not because God just wants to help you spiritually. It's because you didn't do the right thing. So now God is giving you vexation. See, trying to understand this, it seems to me it's going to become very convoluted because now we're just grabbing anywhere we see the word thorn and we're trying to make it all fit together. Is that a good hermeneutical approach? You may think it's a perfect hermeneutical approach. That's okay. The whole point is for you to think about this today.
All of those tribes, all those people that they left in the land ended up being not good for the Israelites because they taught them their religion. And pretty soon, once Israel's in the land and they're living free, all of a sudden now they're turning over to Baal and Ashtaroth. Well,
all right, so now again, the 2 Corinthians, Paul was given the thorn. Now he's saying that the thorn is not what is given to you by God. The thorn is given to you by God when you don't do what God tells you to do. In other words, the thorns are simply the natural result of you not doing what God told you to do. And because you don't do what God tells you to do, the next thing you know, you have Canaanites and Hittites in the land. And then next thing you know, you're turning to idolatry. So then, are thorns not given to us by God? They're just the natural consequences of us not obeying? Well, then if you take that back, then Paul wasn't obeying. What was Paul doing wrong? See, this is when your application. Now, listen to me carefully. This is where an application can literally go back and change your interpretation. See, we kind of started with a basic understanding of the thorns and how Paul got them. Now he's going to applications that almost demand you go back and change your interpretation of what even a thorn is or how one even receives it.
They learned about Baal and Ashtaroth from the Canaanites. That was their god. And so that's what I mean by the Bible leaving things open for you so that when you study the Scriptures, you can get an expanded meaning on what different things mean in the Bible. But as long as you stick with the Bible, all right? Now
that's where he stops. He thinks that establishes a hermeneutical principle. The Bible will leave things open so that you can come along and then you can expand the understanding, but you have to stay with Scripture. Now, I 100% an agreement. You have to stay with Scripture. I am 100% in agreement that sometimes cross-referencing can expand your understanding. But what I'm trying to demonstrate, at times, you can start expanding maybe what should not be expanded, and you can start applying what should not be applied till you end up destroying the original interpretation of the text. The whole thorn in the flesh by Paul seems to be God gave it to him to keep him from being exalted, to, in a sense, protect him from pride. And he was going to use it to try to demonstrate in your weakness that I am made strong. Now, people have tried to take these passages and apply them to everyone else and make them almost prescriptive for like 2,000 years. Well, where is the limit? Now, what he did is he focused on the word thorns and like, okay, let's look up other verses that have thorns. I think thorns are used in like 47 verses in the King James and the whole Bible. I think it's 47, something along those lines. And then he starts looking for thorns and like, okay, see, you don't know what kind of thorn you have? Well, your thorn could be the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches and the lust for things. That could be your thorns. Well, wait a minute. So God gave me those negative things? Why would God give me those negative things? God gives me basically sin so that I will be weak, so that his strong can be magnified. Well, if we're going to go that direction, just think of the implications. God's literally going to give you basically sin so that you will be weak, so that he can be made strong. Well, then don't come after me for my sin because God is the one who gave it to me. Well, that would have serious implications. But then his next application is the Canaanites and the Hittites. And so then his argument was a thorn can be the result of you not doing what God said. So you didn't do what God told you, so now you have something to vex you. You have vexation and trouble because that the thorns are the result of your compromise. So is the thorn something God gives you, or is thorns something that's a result of you not doing what God said? Or is it both? And how are you connecting all of this to 2 Corinthians 12? Now, what you could say is that what you could do is not connect these. Right? In a sense, you could say in 2 Corinthians, thorns. The thorn here is what Paul was given by God for a specific purpose. Right? A thorn could be, thorns in Judges are the consequences. They ended up with thorns because they didn't do what God said. In other words, if you separate them, you're not trying to connect them, you're separating them. It's not expanding the meaning. These are completely different meanings and different context. Hey, look, when we compromise and we don't do what God tells us, we end up with thorns. Things that are going to cause us trouble, things that could cause us pain, things that's going to be difficult. Hey, there are thorns in this world, things that are going to cause us problems spiritually that can choke out the word of God in our lives. And these things it's not that God gives these things to us. These are just the result. You're separate. It's not expanding the meaning. You could look through the Bible and all the different ways in which thorns are mentioned and how they are used, not to interlock them or connect them, but to just say, this is interesting. Thorns are used to describe the following situations or are used in the following situations and not connect them. To me, that would make more hermeneutical sense. The way thorns are being used in Judges has nothing to do with how he's using it as how to identify the thorn in your life. Well, I guess you could do it that way, but it's not the same kind of thorn. Paul was given something specific, right? And it seemed to be given to him by God. You can't then take that concept and apply it everywhere else. So I guess you could say thorns are used in the following ways. So maybe he's on to something, right? He's on to something. He just did not quite articulate exactly how this should be used. And I would say the one in Mark, those are not thorns given to that. That just seems that, hey, we live in this world and we're sinners and these things can choke out the word. I don't know if it's so much like, hey, these are thorns that I have, or you would have to say every person has these thorns because those things come from the sinful nature, right? How do you apply this? The one in Judges, I don't even know how the application is there, right? Unless you just step back and just say, hey, when we compromise, then we end up with negative things. So here's what I want you to do today. If you take the Blue Letter Bible app and look up thorns, you will notice, yes, it occurs 40 and 47 verses in the King James. You should be able to scroll through these quickly, right? Like the first one's Genesis 3:18. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee. Hang on, I don't know what just happened. The whole thing blinked and it all disappeared. All right, thorns, here we go. The first one is Genesis 3:18. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. This is Genesis 3:18. Now that to me, I would have to go look at the context, but I'm pretty good from memory. I think I'm in the right spot. That's after the fall. We know it's after the fall. And so thorns are the consequences of the fall. Now, how far do you take that? Now, this is speaking of literal thorns, right? The literal consequence of the fall is going to, the literal consequences of the fall is literally going to impact the nature itself. Creation itself is going to be impacted by the fall. Instead of this nice garden, now you're going to have thorns and thistles. Things are going to be much more difficult. Now, do you apply that? Do you take that and make it an allegory for all the thorns that are going to show up after? See, you got to be careful. What's the limit you can do with those thorns in Genesis 3:18? Exodus 22:6. If fire break out and catch in thorns, so that the stacks of corn or the standing corn of the field be consumed therewith, he that kindleth the fire shall surely make restitution. All right, now, is this just speaking about real thorns and real fire and what happens? Do you try to make that allegorical somehow? Numbers 33:55. But if you shall not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come to pass that those which yet remain shall be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your side. Now, Numbers 33:55, that tells them that they're supposed to drive out the land, drive them out. And if you don't, there will be thorns. Now, you could argue then, if we wanted to, that maybe there is some truth that when we don't obey God, the consequences are thorns. There's going to be negative consequences for disobedience. They're going to be thorns in our side. They're going to be pricks in our eyes. They're going to vex you. Now, on one hand, then you're going to say, well, there's always going to be some thorns because I'm never in perfect obedience. Well, correct. So then how far do you take that? Joshua 23:13. Know for a certainty that the Lord your God will no more drive out any of these nations from before you, but they shall be snares and traps unto you, and scourges in your side and thorns in your eyes. Now, why is God no longer going to drive them out? Joshua 23:13. Why is God going to no longer drive them out? What was the reason? Because the people didn't, or like why has God decided not to? And he's telling them they're going to be thorns. Then it goes to Judges 2:13. All right, that concept is used frequently. Now, there may be an actual lesson here. Like the way he kind of tried to connect it to 2 Corinthians, maybe that doesn't work, but there still may be a lesson in this. So today's focus is all about thorns. What I want you to do is go through the 47 verses. Just look through them quickly. It should not take you long. Look up Blue Letter Bible app is a great way to do so. And then just kind of just look through. And if you can, take a notebook and just write down thorns, write down the reference and just briefly what it's referencing. Now, if you think there's a spiritual picture there, great. Just be careful with it. Okay? Just be careful with it. Obviously, how it's used in 2 Corinthians, that to me, you can't take these and bring them back to 2 Corinthians. They have to be separate from 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians, Paul was given specific thorn in his flesh, and it has specific purpose. Now, how we apply to that? Well, what he did is, hey, you may not know what thorn you have, and then he just started going to all of these others as almost as if God could be given these. Well, you got to be careful with that. See, there's all kinds of implications there. But he does mention the fact that, yes, we can state this, that when something is mentioned in the Bible, it is always interesting to go see how it's mentioned everywhere else in the Bible. Now, what we can and can't do with that, a lot will determine by the context in which those scriptures are found. So he is correct that the understanding of something can be expanded by searching the rest of the Bible. How we lock these in and connect them, I'm not so sure. Now, again, that was not his ultimate point. He was just saying this in passing. He was just going in passing. So his ultimate idea is to get to the 7 thunders, right? So what he's going to do is probably use somewhat of the same thing. Here are 7 thunders. Now let's go look at how thunder is mentioned and see if we can figure this out. All right, which I definitely want to get to. But I wanted to get to this first. I think the way it first was implied, now once you kind of step back and not try to connect it to 2 Corinthians, then I do believe thorns do show up in different ways. And maybe the primary way that it's used first, after you get out of Genesis, well, maybe Genesis 3 is the once we sin, the result of sin, the result of compromise is thorns. I mean, if you take from Genesis 3, the result of the fall. Now that's physical thorns, right? That's physical thorns in Genesis 3:18. But maybe then That sets up a picture that works throughout the Bible. Exodus 22:6. We don't get a lot of help there, but Numbers and Judges and Joshua and Judges. All of that seems to imply, hey, your compromise is going to lead to these thorns being a vexation upon you. Then maybe we can do something with that. Maybe we can. So you'll have to see. Hang on, it disappeared on me again. I'm going back to it. If once we get past, Judges seems to do that frequently. Well, you see, once you get to Judges 8, it may seem to take a different approach. Then when you get to 2 Samuel 23:6, but the sons of Belial shall be of them as thorns thrust away. Okay, well, maybe it still kind of applies a little bit, maybe. 2 Chronicles 33:11. Now, wherefore the Lord brought upon them the captains of the host of the king of Assyria, which took Manasseh among the thorns and bound him with feathers and carried him to Babylon. There may be something here. Psalm 58:9, before your pots can fill the thorns, he shall take them away as with a whirlwind, both living and in his wrath. What are the thorns talking about there? There may be something to this. Just how we work it may require some being careful, right? So when my first thought was, well, wait a minute, he went from 2 Corinthians, and I don't know if we should have gone. I think what we should have done is, hey, 2 Corinthians mentions thorns in the flesh. Well, what you may not realize is thorns is mentioned in 47 verses in the Bible. And they're used maybe in some specific ways, depending on the context. Let's start in Genesis. Let's go through and let's establish how all the different meanings of thorns and how they can be utilized and how they may serve as a spiritual picture and how they can be applied. And then we'll work our way back to 2 Corinthians. Now, that wasn't his goal. He just wanted to see you can expand the meaning. Okay. But the way it originally sounded was, hey, you need to know what thorns are in your life, as if God's going to give you the thorns, and for you to figure it out, you got to go to the rest of the Bible. But I don't know when you can say in some of these cases, God is the one giving you these thorns, because he even established some of these thorns are there because, well, of your own compromise. So it can definitely expand the meaning. So thorns, that's what I want you to consider today. That's what I want you to consider today. And I'm very grateful for that. Even that little part in that sermon. I mean, I've already spent 58 minutes. I'm still trying to figure it out. But if we work through it, then maybe there's something here that we often overlook or we miss. But at the same time, we don't want to connect, but we don't want to ignore. We don't want to make it say more than it does, but we don't want to make it say less than it does. We got to know when to apply and when not to apply, how to apply, how not to apply. These are the difficulties of biblical interpretation, and you've got to be very, very careful with it. Now, he was just trying to establish a basic point so he could get to the 7 thunders. But it's given me plenty to think about. So there you have it. Today, Friday, May the 10th, 2024. For your today's focus. Thorns. Know when to hold them. Know when to say they're yours. And know when to fold them and say, no, I don't know if that's applicable. I don't know if that's applicable for me. Right? That's what you need to figure out today. Hopefully you'll spend some time doing that. Hopefully it'll be interesting. Hopefully it'll be beneficial. Can't wait to see what you find. You can email me, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Have a great day.